If you ever look at a map of North America, I mean, really look at it, you see all these French names. St. Louis, Detroit, New Orleans.
Quebec, Montreal, they're everywhere.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's not random. It points to this massive 500-year-old story of exploration that basically shaped the whole continent.
It absolutely does. And today we're going to unpack just that. We'll get into the key figures, what was driving them, and the huge impact the early French presence had.
We're talking from the Atlantic coast through the frozen north.
All the way down Mississippi. Our goal is to give you the essential facts, not just what they found, but why it was so important.
Okay, so let's start with the big objective. When those first French ships headed west, they weren't really thinking about building a huge empire like the Spanish.
No, not at first. They were obsessed with something else. A simple and, well, an impossible goal.
The Northwest Passage.
The Northwest Passage. It was this mythical shortcut, a river they thought would cut right through North America and lead them straight to Asia.
To the spice trade. All the riches. It was like a lottery ticket.
It really was. And they spent decades just searching, looking for a river that would somehow lead to China.
And the first person to really give it a shot for France was Giovanni da Verrazzano back in 1524.
Right. Verrazzano was actually Italian, but he was working for the French king, Francis I. And this was basically a reaction to Spain and Portugal's success.
The king wanted a piece of the action.
He did. So Verrazzano sails up this huge stretch of the Atlantic coast from around the Carolinas all the way to Newfoundland.
And on that trip, he found two places that are, iconic today.
He did. He's the one credited with being the first European to document New York Harbor and also Narragansett Bay.
So even though he failed to find the passage.
His voyage was foundational, absolutely. His maps gave France its first real formal claim to land in North America. He planted the flag, so to speak.
Okay, so Verrazzano fails, but the king doesn't give up. He just changes the mission.
Right. The next mission was broadened. Find the passage, sure, but also find riches. Gold.
Which brings us to Jacques Cartier, starting in 1534.
Cartier is a huge name. On his very first trip, he sails into the Gulf of St. Lawrence and plants this giant 30-foot wooden cross.
A pretty clear statement.
Oh, yeah. It was basically saying this all belongs to France now.
But his second trip, in 1535, that's when he really pushed deep inland.
That's the one. He sailed way up the St. Lawrence River, reaching the areas where, modern Quebec and Montreal are now.
This is where the name Canada comes from, right?
It is. He asked the local Iroquois people what the area was called, and they used their word Kanata.
Which just meant village or settlement.
Exactly. But Cartier misunderstood. He thought it was the name for the entire region, and, well, the name just stuck.
But that journey was incredibly rough. The winters there are no joke.
Terrifying. Cartier and his crew were not prepared for that kind of cold. And then disease hit, scurvy, which is a horrible vitamin C deficiency.
It killed a lot of them.
It did. They only survived because the local indigenous people taught them how to make a tea from pine bark that was full of vitamin C. It was a really hard lesson.
And a crucial one. It taught the French that survival meant cooperation.
Absolutely. But Cartier came back with no gold and no passage, so the French crown basically lost interest for, almost 70 years?
Yeah. It was a long time. The cost and the danger just seemed too high.
So when France finally came back, they had a completely different goal. It wasn't about a quick gold grab anymore. It was about a permanent presence.
And that leads us to the father of New France, Samuel de Champlain.
Champlain. He was a different breed, not just an explorer. He was a master mapmaker, a builder, and a diplomat.
And in 1608, he founded Quebec.
He did, and the spot he chose was brilliant.
Why there, specifically?
Quebec is at the narrowest point of the St. Lawrence River. It was incredibly easy to defend, but more importantly, it was the gateway to the entire interior of the continent.
So if you control Quebec, you control all the trade.
You control everything. And Champlain knew he couldn't do it with just military force. He immediately started building strong alliances with the Huron and Algonquin tribes. He knew they had to work together.
He even explored way past the settlement, right? He was the first European to see Lake Champlain.
He was. His maps were so detailed that they transformed this vague idea of North America into a real navigable place. He understood that you had to integrate, not just conquer.
And that integration was all about economics. If it wasn't gold, what was fueling this whole enterprise?
It was fur, specifically beaver fur.
Right, the famous fur trade.
Yeah.
But why beaver pelts? What was so special about them?
Believe it or not, it was all about hats.
Hats.
In Paris and London, a high-quality felt hat was the ultimate status symbol. And the underfur from a beaver pelt made the absolute best, most waterproof felt you could get.
So there was this massive demand back in Europe.
Insatiable. It drove the entire economy of New France for generations. And this created a totally different kind of colony than the English had.
How so?
Well, the English were focused on farming, clearing land, and pushing native people out. The French model needed movement, and it needed cooperation.
Which is where the coureur de bois come in.
The runners of the woods. These French traders didn't stay put. They traveled deep inland, trading things like metal pots and blankets for beaver pelts that the Native Americans, who were expert hunters, had prepared.
It was a truly interdependent relationship.
Totally. The French needed the hunting skills and the local knowledge, and the indigenous peoples wanted the durable European goods. That relationship defined everything.
And that push for more fur is what drove them further west.
Into the Great Lakes. I mean, you have to imagine what it was like for Europeans to see these massive inland seas for the first time. Lake Ontario, Erie, Huron, Michigan, Superior.
Just the scale of it is hard to comprehend. How did they even navigate it?
They adopted local technology. They used light, fast birch bark canoes. They could carry heavy loads, and crucially, you could carry the canoe itself when you had to go overland.
And those overland spots are called portages.
Exactly. A portage is just that strip of land you have to cross to get from one river or lake to another. The French mapped every single one.
Because they were the choke points of the whole system.
They were the arteries. And the French built their forts along the lake shores to protect these trade routes, these portages. An explorer named Jean Nicolet was one of the first to push all the way to Lake Michigan and Green Bay.
So they've mastered the Great Lakes, but there was still this one huge mystery left.
The Great River, the one the tribes always talked about.
So in 1673, two people set out to find it.
A priest, Father Jacques Marquette, and a trader, Louis Joliet. They started near Lake Michigan, and, well, they connected the dots. They went down the Fox River, then the Wisconsin.
Until they paddled out onto the Mississippi River?
The big one. They were the first Europeans to explore its upper section. They paddled south for hundreds of miles.
How far did they actually get?
They made it down to the mouth of the Arkansas River. They figured they were getting close to Spanish territory and didn't want to risk it, so they turned back.
But their journey was huge. It proved the river flowed south into the Gulf of Mexico.
Which meant France now held the key to a water route that cut the entire continent in half, north to south.
And the man who saw the full potential of that was René Robert Cavelier Sieur de La Salle.
La Salle. He was incredibly ambitious. He decided he was going to finish what Marquette and Joliet started.
So in 1682, he travels the entire length of the Mississippi all the way to the Gulf.
All the way. And when he gets there, he makes one of the biggest land claims in history.
What did he claim?
Everything. The entire Mississippi River basin, every piece of land touched by the river and all of its tributaries, he claimed it all for King Louis XIV of France.
And he named it
Louisiana, in the king's honor. I mean, think about that. A single claim that stretched from the Rocky Mountains to the Appalachians. It was enormous.
It's just staggering. But the French population in North America was so small compared to the English colonies.
Yeah.
How did they possibly hold on to all that territory?
It all comes back to that one word, cooperation. They had to. They didn't have the numbers to conquer anyone, so they relied on alliances for trade, for military support, for everything.
They had to learn the languages, adopt local customs.
They really did, and this led to something unique. Intermarriage between French traders and native women was really common, much more so than in other colonies.
Creating a whole new culture.
Yes, the Métis people. They have mixed French and indigenous heritage and became absolutely essential as guides, interpreters, and traders, really cementing the whole French network.
But that close contact had a devastating downside.
A tragic one. European diseases like smallpox spread like wildfire. Indigenous people had no immunity, and the death rates were catastrophic, which terribly weakened the very allies the French depended on.
So let's shift to life in the actual settlements, like along the St. Lawrence. What was that like?
It was tough. The climate was harsh, and they developed a unique way to divide up the land called the seigneurial system.
Instead of square plots, they used long, narrow strips.
Right, and every single strip started at the riverbank and went inland. This design guaranteed that every farmer had access to the river, which was their highway for transportation.
And they grew hardy crops.
Wheat, peas, corn, things that could survive. It was a very self-reliant, rugged lifestyle.
Okay, the last piece of the puzzle here is the Catholic Church.
The church was central to the whole project. The French government sent a lot of missionaries, especially Jesuits.
And they weren't just focused on religion.
No, their role was also political and cultural. They went to the most remote villages, learned the languages, and often acted as diplomats.
And they left behind incredible records.
The Jesuit relations? These were their detailed reports sent back to France. They wrote down everything: customs, geography, politics. For historians today, they are an absolute goldmine of information.
So when you put it all together, the French came looking for a shortcut to Asia.
And they ended up creating this massive trade empire based on beaver fur.
An empire that was geographically huge, but held together not by conquest, but by controlling the waterways.
And through those critical, complex alliances with indigenous peoples, theirs is a story of adaptation and trade.
Just think about this. When La Salle claimed the entire Mississippi Basin, he linked the frozen north of Canada to the warm Gulf of Mexico. For a time, France held the claim to the very heart of the continent.
An empire built on water, diplomacy, and the demand for a fancy hat.
We've carved out a huge chunk of knowledge today. Good luck with your studies.
See you next time.